a heist. Yeah, mess me around, and now you keep calling, wondering if you can make it right. I told you it's the end for you, and I swear this time we're through. But it's a lie when you call my name. Yeah, ooh, that sounds so right, so right, so right. Deep down, wishing you were mine. Deep down, miss you all the time. Dream about what we could have been if we tried up. But deep down, wishing you were mine, were mine. You got me so deep, I wanna go deep. You got me so, yeah. You got me so deep, I wanna go deep. You got me so, yeah. Yeah, need to be strong. As soon as I see ya, you can turn my tables back around. So easy, you got the control. Just hearing your speakers gets me kinda crazy, kinda foolish, foolish. I know that it's the end for you, and I swear this time we're through. But it's a lie when you call my name. Yeah, ooh, that sounds so right, so right, so right. Deep down, wishing you were mine. Deep down, miss you all the time. Dream about what we could have been if we tried up. But deep down, wishing you were mine, were mine. Dream, but it's a lie when you call.
Yeah, that was a smooth transition, wasn't it? Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the EU-INT Pod. I just have to fix some things, and then we can get started. Today was a wonderful day. Yesterday was King's Day in the Netherlands. It was very fun. So today, welcome to the podcast. Anyway, today we're going to be discussing some EU news from the week, and see what pops up. Basically, we could also have a nice discussion about I don't know, EU development, or maybe even the DSA. We'll see. We'll see how far we get. Anyway, so. This week, full of news, lots going on. Sudan evacuation was one of them. We also saw new attacks on Kiev with missiles by the Russians, all very bad. But we also saw some good news, which is that EU warned Twitter about disinformation after Musk's policy shifts found to boost Kremlin propaganda. So the EU is finally rolling out its Digital Services Act, which will be, I think, will be active or activated in August 27th. So we're getting close, you know. And after that, they can start laying down fines for people that don't, or for big companies that don't adhere to them. And they came out with a list of 19 companies this week. Which the EU wants to have directly under them in the DSA. And one of them was Zalando, funnily enough. So that's the German retailer. For some reason, they've got a massive user base. Twitter, Google Maps, Apple is in there, Facebook. So, very interesting going to be how that's going to go in, well, let's see, in, what is it, 2, 3, 4 months? So, we'll see. Pardon, by the way, I've got a little bit of a cold. Must be all the partying I'm doing. Next up is Ukraine's progress in implementing the Commission's conditions as of mid-March 2023. This is by the Stockholm Institute of Eastern European Studies. And they went through all the conditions that the European Commission has given Ukraine for their accession to the European Union. And you can see they've gone through quite a lot already. Conditions mostly implemented judicial reform and fight against corruption, which we've talked about before. Zelensky has done a very, very good job. He saw his ratings when the war started and thought, you know, I can do more with this. I can make this count. and especially when they went for EU accession. I mean, they really took it seriously. You can see it. Media market is another thing that they mostly implemented so far. So they've got more free media now. And legislation on national minorities, which is very important because that was one of the talking points that the Russians were trying to use against the Ukrainians. Oh, they're not allowed to speak Russian in school anymore. I mean, firstly, that's up to the school. And secondly, now there's actually legislation on treating national minorities with dignity and respect. So it's taken away from Putin's arsenal, which is good. Progress ongoing, anti-money laundering and law enforcement sector reforms. Now, this is something that doesn't easily come. This requires a societal shift, and in the middle of a war, it's very hard to restructure law enforcement. Also, the anti-oligarch legislation, they're working on that. And of course, the constitutional court reform, which is some action taken, but serious issues remain to be addressed. So they still have to make sure that their constitutional court is not beholden to the political power and considered free and fair. Something that some countries kind of have a problem with. Anyway, let's continue. This week was also the North Sea Summit, which saw 9 countries go to the Belgium town of Ostend. And they had a great meeting there, and lots was discussed about energy, windmill parks, all those kind of things. But as you can see by one of the tweets, not only was Britain the only one of 9 countries at today's North Sea Summit not to send their PMs, the energy minister that they did send, Greg Schnaps, spent his time here bad-mouthing the EU. He tells journos being at the summit reminded him of how much flexibility Great Britain now has out of the EU. That's not the only thing he said. Let me just pull up the thread here. Scheps also uses limited speaking time to lament that the North Sea exists at all, seeming to try to make a Brexit red tape point before claiming that climate change caused North Sea to be created. To quote Logan Roy, "These are not serious people," said one European diplomat. It comes off as arrogance, and I mean, he was talking about Doggerland, which I mean, it's a little bit, it's a little bit embarrassing for the Brits, but we were used to it from them for now, so anyway, back to the stories. We need to strengthen EU fiscal rules, not dilute them. This was an opinion piece on the Financial Times, very, very worth reading, about how the EU has a tendency of making more and more rules rather than working, giving the rules that they have some teeth. Worth a read. Baltics blast China diplomat for questioning sovereignty of ex-Soviet states. Yeah, this guy. Liu Xiaoye. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong. China's ambassador to France said that the former Soviet countries have no effective status in international law. China already rolled this back. This was a big thing, and they had to do some serious damage control because he is the ambassador to France, which not the best move to do when you're ambassador. Just ad lib on what you think. So the Chinese have reassured all the post-Soviet states, former Soviet countries, that everything's fine and dandy and they're still considered states according to China. And China actually did a call with Zelensky this week, which was also interesting. That was the first time that the Chinese and the Ukrainian Prime Minister spoke, and they spoke for about an hour, which is interesting. And we'll see. I mean, China wants to take a more proactive approach to negotiation of the conflict. That's fine, but I mean, the Ukrainian point stands. You can't have a ceasefire under pressure by Russia. With them invading and stuff, they do have to withdraw before any negotiation really takes place. And I think Putin's really done it. To get Zelensky and Putin around one table, that would have to happen if there were to be some kind of negotiated end to this. I don't see it happening quite yet. What else? Oh yeah, of course the climate change was a big thing this week. Of course, we're seeing record temperatures right now in Spain and in Portugal, especially in the inner parts of Spain. I think they're already reaching like 40 degrees, and it's only April, so it's very nice for them. Nice weather and stuff, but we still have a way to go until it's July and August, and the hottest months are there. So make sure you stock up on extra drinking supplies, people in Spain. For the rest, the Dutch flower exports to Russia are blooming despite moral questions. They're having a lot of military funerals these days, so that's not really a surprise. There's also going to be an EU mission to Moldova to combat threats from Russia. So this is an European a civilian mission to help the East European nation combat growing threats from abroad. We'll focus on crisis management and hybrid threats, including cybersecurity and counter foreign information manipulation and interference. So that'll be interesting to see what they come up with there. Putin's diamonds, which is the same thing as with the flower exports. There are certain sectors which are still exempt from sanctions, and they're starting to want to close those off as well. The EU's actually come up with a deal at the G7, together with all the other G7 countries, to stop the smuggling of oil and of resources to Russia via third countries, and that's something they're still working on as well. For the rest, there was a really interesting piece in the Financial Times about Ursula von der Leyen, about how she forged a bolder and stronger EU and her impact on the European structure itself. You might not agree with her or not like her or whatever, but she has had a great impact on centralizing the EU decision making, basically. Definitely worth a read on the Financial Times. UK government U-turns on plan to scrap or revise all EU law. Yeah, this has got the Brexiteers going, so it's going to be interesting to see what comes from that. I think they've done so many U-turns by this time you don't really know if it's ever going to be a law or not, or so I'm not too worried about that. For the rest, Hungary's been in the news negatively a lot this week. No EU funds to Hungary. The US ambassador to NATO has spoken about how Hungary is preventing certain deliveries of weapons and certain other things, and that he's not very happy. And there was actually a really interesting story today. Let me just pull that up. About Hungsit or Hungexit, or not sure how you want to say that. But that's something that more and more people are starting to consider. I mean, how invested is Hungary in the EU is the big question, and how much are they invested in the multilateral world that the EU and NATO basically defend. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes from that. I can't find the thing right now, but I'll show it to you guys later. I'll put it in the comments or in the description. For the rest, here's the extreme heat. Zikol Zelensky, we talked about that. Oh yeah, Borrell urges EU governments to send warships to the Taiwan Strait. This was very nice of Borrell. You know, Borrell is the European Union High Representative for Foreign Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. And he basically heads the EU's version of NATO, which is the Common Security and Defense Policy. And but he doesn't really have any military power. He has to do everything at behest of the EU governments. But he does have a lot of influence with them because he is part of the foreign policy package, which many countries, include the EU in. So it'll be interesting to see if the Germans or if I think the Italians are actually sending an aircraft carrier to the Taiwan Strait. There was a map which I'll have to look up in a bit about how many of these Navy flotillas are in the Chinese Sea at the moment, and it's getting a little bit busy. You've got the Russians and the Chinese there. You've got the South Koreans. You've got the Japanese, the US, of course, and then now the European nations, plus a little bit of Australia down south. So it's getting a little bit busy. It's been described as a powder keg at the moment. Especially with North Korea launching its missiles effectively as a counterpoint to all these drills that the US does. The US does a lot of drills near South Korea, and they tend to ratchet it down if the North Koreans are being nice, and ratchet up if they aren't. And it's kind of like a reciprocal effect because the North Koreans will never be nice as long as there's a carrier fleet nearby. But that makes but because they're not being nice, that makes the US and the South Koreans very nervous, so they have more exercises. So that's something that that will definitely still be something to watch. EU military committee in Stockholm coordinated specialized training of Ukrainian soldiers. Various locations now operational across Europe. Yeah, there's a lot of training going on in Poland and in Germany at the moment. I think the number of soldiers that they want to train by the end of the year is 35,000, and they're about halfway, so that's ahead of schedule. Yeah, we'll have to look. I mean, the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive, which everyone's waiting for, and nobody knows if it'll actually happen, is something that we're basically waiting for. And that's something that the United States, the European Union, and others are making sure that there's enough personnel and things trained for that. So it'll be interesting to see if this kind of has an effect on it, if lots of European trained troops will be hitting the front lines there. Russia, watch out. You just get out, man. It's time, Let's have a look. There's a few things. Oh yeah, the interesting report from the European Ombudsman that the EU cannot have political legitimacy without moral authority, and this is about the MEP scandal, the Qatargate, where where MEPs where MEPs were caught taking bribes from Qatar to do with the World Cup, and there's other countries involved as well. Morocco is one. I believe Saudi Arabia is another. These are countries that keep on popping up because they want access to the EU, and they're they got the money and they're not afraid to pay for it. So we'll see about that. If that still gets a tail, the European Ombudsman thinks that the reforms are not going fast enough, but we'll see. On the rest of the news, there's Brazil hopes for conclusion to the EU-Mercosur trade deal this year. Brazilian President Lula visited Portugal and Spain this week. Bit controversial because he said some stupid things about Ukraine, like there should be peace now and things that we've already discussed at length in our Discord. So he wants the EU-Mercosur trade deal signed this year, which is, which is probably not going to be the case, to be honest. With there's some serious problems with European countries trusting them at the moment due to their stances on things like Ukraine. We'll see. Another trade deal, Australia is coming up. There's been good progress there, so we might actually see a trade deal this year, maybe next year, which would be great. We've got some news from Australia in the Forum Gottefunken Discord. So they'll be happy with that because that'll take the price down, and they'll be able to buy proper BMWs again. That'll be nice. Yeah, and that's basically it. We've got another few days until next week's. Well, it's actually on the 9th is Europe Day and the start of the Eurovision Song Contest. So that's something that we're looking forward to. We're going to be doing a giveaway on Forum Gottefunken as well. And, of course, we're going to have a Eurovision watch party, especially for the finals, by the way. And after the finals, the day after the finals, is actually the Turkish election. Of course, Erdogan fell ill this week. He was on a TV interview, and he got ill. The camera wasn't zoomed in on him, so we don't know how ill he got. But he's taken a few days off from campaigning for sure. And this is going to affect that election a lot. So anyway, thanks very much. I think that's it for tonight. If you want to know more, hear more, just ask around, join Forum Gottefunken, and we'll see you next week. Night.